Okay, I see the record button's on, so I can start. So we're going to talk to you about getting ready for brush herbicide treatments for this year. And so what we need to, if we're going to be successful, there are some things we have to consider. And one is we need to understand what the target is for the brush control. We need to have some realistic expectations related to the method that we're going to use. We need to use the right equipment, the right herbicide, proper additives, the correct method, and the correct timing. Timing is important on some of these practices. On others, it's not quite as important, but we need to take that into consideration. So the target, this is what's underground on a mesquite. And so we're looking here at the soil surface here. And so below the soil surface, there's a bud zone that runs all the way down to the first lateral root. And you can see these knots on that bud zone. Those are dormant buds. And if we take the top of that mesquite off with any kind of practice, dosing, cutting, and we don't do anything else to it, then those buds are going to be released and they'll sprout. So if we're going to kill this mesquite, and Huisache has the same kind of mechanism, resprouting mechanism, we have to either remove that plant, remove this resprouting mechanism mechanically, or get a herbicide to move uniformly into the bud zone. And that uniformity is important, and I'll show you why in the next slide here. I'm sure you've all kind of seen this driving down the road and seen part of a tree killed in a fence line. So what we did here, we were spraying this fence line, and we were able to get this part here that looks dead, but we were not able to cover the rest of the tree. So what happened was the herbicide moved down through the plant, the part of the plant that we sprayed, but did not circulate back up through the plant. So that's why coverage is really, really important. We want to get, if we're doing leaf sprays, we want to get total leaf coverage, or the best, or close as we can, so that we can get uniform movement into that bud zone. Okay, so basically we kind of see mesquite, for example, growing in two different growth forms. This one here that I'm pointing to is a single stem plant. It's not been disturbed throughout its life. If we disturb that plant by shredding, dosing, burning, just any kind of practice that takes the top off but does not get to the bud zone or remove the bud zone or get herbicide to move uniformly in the bud zone, we get this multi-stem growth form. And so with the single stem growth form, we've got a lot more options than we do with the multi-stem form. And we'll kind of look at that as we go along here. So this is some work that was done with aerial applications of herbicide Clopyralid. That's the active ingredient, and that's basically Reclaim, which Dow has removed from the market because of a newer herbicide. But you'll see that with 1 to 2 stems, they got 75% mortality. As the stem number moved up, 3 to 5 dropped to 59, and then down to 40 when they had 6 or more stems. So I think what's happening here is we're not getting uniform movement into that bud zone with those multiple stem plants. It's just harder to get good coverage, especially from the air or ground broadcast. So one of the things that we need to look at is these realistic expectations or unrealistic. I've had questions about, can you use Spike 20P, which is tebuthyron, for Huisache control. And so we have data to show that if we do that, we're going to get a low kill level. So this is what I mean about having realistic expectations. Don't just think because you use a herbicide that it's going to work for you. It has to be the correct herbicide and the right target. The Spike or the tebuthyron is a good herbicide. it's got some issues with side effects. In other words, it's soil applied, and it can affect some non-target species, but it is can be very effective on plants that it works on. But Huisache is not one of them. So one of the places that we can find some information about realistic expectations is in this publication that we produce. It's got a number here, ERM 1466, and if you will put your email address in the chat box there, along with your certificate, we'll mail an electronic copy of this publication here. It is in electronic form, and it's we use it for a reference, and I'll show you how we can use this. So for example, in this guide, every recommendation or suggestion has a kill rating associated with it, from low, which is 0 to 35, moderate is 36 to 55, high is 56 to 75, and then very high, 76 to 100%. That's what we expect if it's done correctly at the right time in terms of kill. So that gives you some idea of how effective this practice might be. So in the publication, there's an index, and for example, there are page numbers, and this, if you have this loaded on an iPad or on your computer, you can click on that the page number, and it will you'll go to a page, that page that you just clicked on, and so on that page it lists the plants that we're looking for, or weeds that we're looking for, control suggestion, and then it has a column with the herbicide common names, not the trade names, but or product names, but active ingredient names. And then if there's a broadcast suggestion for it, or individual plant suggestion for it, you'll see that that column will be filled out, and it'll give you a rating. So for example, for this one I'm pointing to, individual plant treatment, that's a very high kill rate. If we go down here to this column here for Baccharis, we've got a broadcast recommendation or suggestion, and the kill rate here is high, which means 56 to 75% in that range. So it's in that range. So if you get 56% with this method, you're in the expected range. You might get lucky and get 75, but and you might get lucky and get more than that. But this is what we expect when it's applied at the right time. And then you'll see over here in the other column, the individual plant treatment, that particular practice shows a high. This is 2,4-D, shows a high kill level, and then these down here show very high. So that's the kind of information that you can find in this publication. And it'll give you realistic expectations. Another source of information is these brush buster publications. We've got these for Mesquite, Huisache, Pricklypear, Cut-Stump, which are things that we'll look at and talk about today. We've also got some other brush buster publications, but these are kind of the core publications. And what these do is they feature 2 to 3 maybe the best individual plant treatment options. And they're not all herbicides. For example, with Pricklypear, there's a mechanical suggestion, so these are good sources of information if you're looking at targeting a specific species. Okay, so let's kind of look at some equipment here. We'll first look at equipment for stem sprays for individual plant treatments. And so kind of the equipment of choice is a backpack sprayer. This particular one has a aftermarket harness that is padded here. It has a padded belt here, so it takes weight off your back. It makes it more comfortable to carry the backpack around. Personally, I like this piston pump mechanism here. This particular manufacturer also has a diaphragm type pump, but it's a little harder to clean out. And so I've had really good luck with the piston pump type mechanism. I'll tell you that if you don't clean it out, it's not gonna last very long, because when we're doing these individual plant treatments with the stem spray, we're using diesel as a carrier for the herbicide and Triclopyr ester as the herbicide, or a herbicide that has Triclopyr ester active ingredient, and those are corrosive on these O-rings. So you do have to clean it out after you do your applications, and they'll last a long time if you do that. All right, so a lot of these backpack sprayers come with these fan type nozzles that we're showing here. And so the problem there is that our target is that stem. We want to spray that stem from about 12 inches high all the way to ground line and all the way around. And what's happening here is we're getting spray that's off target, so we're wasting spray. So there's a solution to that, and what we do is we'll use these cone jet X1 nozzles like this. They're a small orifice nozzle, and then behind that nozzle we'll put in a screen check valve. We like to use a 100 mesh screen check valve because what that does is that keeps the nozzle from clogging, and then the check valve, when you let up on the trigger on the spray wand, it stops that nozzle from dribbling. And you do have to take these screen check valves out and clean them pretty frequently, because they will catch things. And once they get clogged, then you won't be able to get spray through the nozzle. Okay, so this is what the spray pattern looks like. This is the X1 nozzle here, and you can see, I think that discoloration there, that's the diesel and the Triclopyr ester solution being sprayed on the stem. And you want to go all the way around the trunk, and from about 12 inches high all the way to the ground line. And the reason we go all the way around is because that herbicide moves down, but it doesn't move around. So if you only get one side of the stem, you'll kill buds below that area, but you won't kill, there's a good chance you won't kill buds on the other side. So in my opinion, with the stem spray, we have to get up close and personal with it. So it's really not something that you can do from an ATV, and the pumps on ATVs typically don't handle oil very well. So this is the backpack is really probably the best tool to do this with. Okay, so when we go to leaf sprays, we're going to change things out a little bit. Now we can do it from from an ATV, or there are other ways we can do this to carry the load for us, spray load. Now we're going to go to a bigger nozzle, this X8 nozzle. We're still going to have that screen check valve behind it, and we want to go that bigger nozzle because now we want more spray volume, so we can get leaf coverage, or pad coverage in the case of Pricklypear. Okay, so this is an example of a couple of guys using backpacks to do pad spray, and it's an effective tool. But the problem is now they're going to be spraying with water as a carrier to do this pad spray, and so you can't. I mean, you don't see that. I mean, the tanks here aren't full, but they were full, more than likely. So with the stem spray, you probably only want to put about a gallon of spray at a time, and then refill after about an hour. But with the leaf spray, you'd probably want to fill this up. Well, that's a good bit of weight to carry around. It's anywhere from 3 to 4 gallons, depending on the tank size. So there are better ways for us to carry that load. And this is one of the ways that we can do that. We can rig up ATVs or mules to carry when we carry the spray load. When we started the Brush Buster program in the mid 90s, the mules weren't really around much then. So we looked at the ATVs, and there are some advantages. You know, the mules can carry more load. The ATVs tend to be more maneuverable. We'll look at that here in a second. So we've got a 12-volt pump power source, 14 to 25 gallon tank. If it's an ATV, if it's a mule, you can go to bigger tanks. 1.4 to 1.8 or a 2 gallon per minute pump. 3/8 inch hose, polywand, spray, X8 nozzle again, and then that screen check valve behind it. And to gain some efficiency, we can rig up an ATV for a crew. And this is an ATV that has two 20-foot hoses coming off either side. And so with this particular rig here, the driver has a spray wand so they can spray what's close to them. And these guys that are walking with those 20-foot hoses, we can cover a 40-foot swath. So we can cover quite a bit of territory with this three-person crew. So one of the things that you want to kind of a tip here is that this is a rack that holds the hoses, and one of the things you need to be aware of is that you can get those hoses wrapped around the wheels. So what we did here was we just put in a ring and we run the hoses through that ring, and that keeps the hoses up away from the wheels. If you don't have something like that to keep those hoses away from the wheels, you will eventually wrap them around there, and you'll probably snap the hose off and have some problems out in the field. So that's just a little tip to keep things going. Okay, so if we, when the density of the plants increases, we may have to go to broadcast applications. And so here in the right-hand side where I'm pointing, this is a tractor with a boom sprayer. And if this Bacchus here is the target, then we've got a problem with coverage, because our spray or boom is below that plant. We need to be 18 inches or 2 feet above that plant to get good coverage. So one of the ways we can do that is with these boomless nozzles, like you see here. This is obviously that's a pretty old picture, but that kind of this mechanism right here, that boomless nozzle, that's still around. So we can use that kind of approach with brush and get good coverage. Okay, so if we go to ground applications, we're going to need a pressure gauge so that we know we're operating in the right range of pressure, and we like to operate. I like to operate about a 30 pounds pressure so that we get small droplet size for a relatively small droplet size for most of our applications. It's not so small. It's not as small as these pecan mist blowers. Those are droplet sizes are way too small, but we want to get a small droplet size so we get good distribution of the spray droplet. And then we need a bypass valve so we can shut the pump off, shut the feed to the boom here. This is the boom right here that's going to receive the herbicide or the spray that we're going to apply. Okay, another thing that we need if we're going to use, especially if we're going to use an ATV, is we're going to have an accurate speedometer. So this one here that I'm pointing to, that one came with the ATV, and that's a good route to go. If you don't have that, then there are these aftermarket type speedometers that are available. But you do need a speedometer, because with an ATV, the only way you can control your output is with speed. So, if you want more volume with an ATV, you have to slow down. If you want less, you have to speed up. And so basically what we do when we put our test plots out with an ATV or a mule, and we'll calculate, when we calibrate, we'll calculate how fast we have to go to put the right amount of herbicide out. And we're usually looking at, for ground broadcast, we're usually looking at 10 to 20 gallons per acre of spray volume. Okay, another useful tool that I've run into and been using for a few years now is this guidance system. And this is a light bar. You can see right here where I'm pointing. This is the light bar, and if you're on course, the lights in the middle are going to be lit up. If you're off course to the right or to the left, those lights will be lit up. And what you do is you set your swath width, whatever that happens to be, and then you set an A-B line from point A to point B, set that, and then as you turn in your vehicle, a number will show up here on the screen. It'll be either a positive or a -1, depending on which way you turned. And then that, once you see that number, that next higher number, and you line up here in the middle, you're on course. And what I would tell you is you need to trust the guidance system, because it does a good job. This one I've used down to as low as 10 feet, a 10-foot swath width, and it keeps you right on course. A real good tip here is that you can set the sensitivity on sensitivity of this light bar to low, medium, or high. And my suggestion is set it to low, because if you set it to high, every bump you hit, you're going to be off course. If you set it to low, you're going to have a lot easier time staying on course. But it is a really good tool. There are more sophisticated versions of this than what I'm using, but this was one that I knew would work on an ATV. Okay, so for ground broadcast, or we can use these boom type sprayers. They use flat fan nozzles. They do a good job of getting coverage for weed management. But as we mentioned before, if this boom is down here low like this, the brush is going to interfere with the boom, or we're not going to be able to get good coverage, because the brush plants are probably going to be higher than this boom is. So we can move to something like this. This is the boom jet nozzle. It produces small droplet size. It needs at least a 3 gallon per minute pump to operate it, but it is an effective tool for doing ground broadcast treatments with brush. You do need a inline filter like we're showing here, because these nozzles the orifices are small, and they can get clogged pretty easily. Another option are these boom buster nozzles like this. They produce a little larger droplet size than the boom jet nozzle. And one of the things that we do with these boomless nozzles is we make sure that if our swath width, when we set our machinery out on a concrete or gravel and we spray to see how wide our swath width is, we want to cut back about at least 10% so that we get enough overlap between one pass and the next one. But this is another option. Like I said, the Boom Buster. These cost about $125. Yeah, it's $125 each. The Boom Jet nozzle that I in the previous slide, that's probably about $150 or so. Okay, so if we're going to do leaf sprays, we need to do those at the right time. So on the left here, we've got a mesquite that's showing what it looks like in early season. We're obviously not there yet. Way down in South Texas, they're getting close to this, but up here where I am, we're not even at bud break yet. So these leaves are light green. They're young. They're not producing excess food, and so if you spray these, you'll kill the leaves. They'll drop off, but you won't get movement of the herbicide from the leaves down to that bud zone. On the right here, the leaves are darker green now. These are mature leaves. Now these leaves are producing more food than they need, and they will translocate food when they're moving food from the leaf for storage in the roots. They will carry that herbicide along with that. But they have to be producing excess food to be able to do that. Okay, so bud break, down where I am, it usually starts about the middle of March. This is, well, 3 years ago now. You can see out here is March 9th, up here is March 14th. So it varies depending on where you are. But the theory is that once bud break occurs, the spray window, the window for leaf spray should open up in about 45 days. And that's a guideline, but it's not set in stone. And my experience over the last several years is we would have bud break in the middle of March, and then which means that by 45 days we should be May 1st, around there, and we're really still not ready to spray. And the reason we're not is because the soil temperature isn't correct. So and also the leaf color is not correct. Now if the leaf color is dark green, then you can be pretty well assured that the soil temperature is correct. But in terms of soil temperature, what we're looking for is 75 degrees at 12 inches deep, a minimum. And so when that happens, then those leaves are typically turning dark green. And after that point, then the spray window opens up for us on mesquite. So this is soil temperatures 3 years ago, from April 25th to May 3rd. Here we are, 72 degrees. It's still not warm enough. So we should be, like I said, around here, around this area, we should be ready, because bud break was middle of March. But my experience has been, it's actually been a couple of weeks later than that. So you can start looking when bud break occurs, but you really want to key on leaf color, and you don't necessarily have to take soil temperature, but you definitely want to look at leaf color. You want uniform dark green leaf color on mesquite. So mesquite, the product of choice right now is Sendero, standalone product. It's a combination of Clopyralid and aminopyralid. The Clopyralid was reclaimed, and so Dow, which has now changed its name to Corteva, has taken reclaim off the market because of Sendero. IPT sprays, our recommendation is 1% concentration. We've looked at higher and lower values, and I'll show you why we settled on 1%. So here we've got a a test where we looked at 0.5% Sendero, 3/4, 1%, and 0.5% of remedy and reclaim. And in terms of statistical difference, it's hard to separate these, but if we look at consistency, though, that bar right there is an error bar, and it shows you, basically what it says is how much variation do you have around that average. And so you see that that bar is smaller than the remedy reclaim bar. It's also smaller than these lower rates of Sendero. So with 3/4 Sendero, we got 87% kill, but a lot of variability around that. With 1% Sendero, we got 93 average, with a lot less variability around that average. So that's the advantage of Sendero, that consistency. Okay, so the Mesquite Brush Buster suggestion for individual plant treatments: 1% Sendero, or you can still use the 0.5% Triclopyr ester, which is Remedy Ultra or generics of that, with the Clopyralid, 0.25% surfactant, 0.25% dye. The dye is put in there so that we can see leaf coverage. We want something on every leaf. So we spray those leaves to wet after dark green, and then that spray window is about 45 to 60 days after bud break to the end of July in the south. And north of here, where I am, you can go a little bit later. But what I would tell you is that I think it's best when that window opens to get in there and do it, because there's a lot of things that can happen to those leaves. Grasshopper damage, hail, rust. And so if you lose the leaves, then you've lost your pump or your access to that bud zone down there that you really want to, that's really the target of your application. Okay, so besides herbicides, we need some spray additives, and one of the, well, I might mention that this fellow here is adding some additives to the tank, and you'll notice that he has chemical resistant gloves, and he's got eye protection, and that's in long sleeve shirt, long pants. That's what you want to be wearing when you are dealing with these herbicides, these range herbicides. So one of the things that we definitely want to have in these leaf spray treatments is a surfactant. We like the commercial surfactants. This is one that we used to be able to get around Uvalde's Activator 90. We want non-ionic surfactants. We want surfactants that have 80 to 90 or even a little bit even more active ingredients. So you can look on the label. In fact, you may be able to see this one says non-ionic surfactant. What that means is it's not going to react with the pesticide. And some people will ask, can you use dishwashing detergent? You can in a pinch, but the thing is we don't know how much to tell you to use. And also you're going to get a lot of foam. So with these commercial surfactants, you're going to get less foam. Okay, so this is why you use a surfactant. This on the left here, this is the spray without a surfactant, and you can see those large droplets there. They're adhering to the surface that was sprayed. When we use a surfactant, it breaks that surface tension between the droplet and that leaf surface, and you get better coverage of the leaf, and therefore you're going to get a better chance of getting the herbicide into the leaf and then getting translocated to that bud zone. So a surfactant is essential. These crop oils have come on in recent years, and if you use a crop oil, you don't need to use a surfactant, but you do need to look at the label and make sure you're using the correct rate, because there's some of these have different rates other than what we use with surfactants. Typically with surfactant, we're looking at a 1/4%, or if you're mixing 100 gallons, we'd have a quart of surfactant to maybe a half a gallon of surfactant in 100 gallons of spray. But the crop oils, you need to look at those labels to make sure. Okay, dyes, when we're doing individual plant treatment, leaf sprays, we want to use a dye because that's going to help us do two things. It's going to help us mark the plants that we treated so that we don't retreat them. And it's also going to help us see coverage, because what we want is every leaf to have something, have spray on it. And typically with individual plant treatments, we get higher mortality than we do with broadcast applications, and the reason is basically coverage. Okay, so we can move to Huisache here. If we have some people in the south part of the state here, Huisache leaf spray, individual plant. This is again individual plant. We can use Grazon P plus D, Grassland L, which is a high load formulation of P plus D. We can use Gunslinger, which is a generic of Grazon P plus D, or we can use Sendero. We want to use the surfactant, dye, and water is going to be the carrier for all these leaf sprays. Okay, so this is kind of what the mix looks like. We'll use a 1% P plus D or Gunslinger, 1% Sendero, or 0.63% Grassland L, because that's a high load formulation. Again, we're going to use a 1/4% surfactant, 1/4% dye. Those are pretty standard. If you're going to increase anything, you might want to, you can increase the surfactant, but the 1/4% is typically works for us. Sometimes you might want to bump the dye up a little bit if you can't, if it's difficult for you to see. Water carrier, we can use backpacks, ATVs, mules, cattle sprayers, the X8 nozzle. And for Huisache, individual plant, we can spray spring or fall with soil temperature above 75, good soil moisture, and you want to make sure that the leaves look healthy, that you've got a full leaf canopy on the Huisache, because they're very sensitive to moisture stress. All right. So this is comparison of Sendero. Sendero is the blue bar here versus P plus D in 2013, and then versus P plus D and Grassland L in 2014. So you can see Sendero does a really good job. The reason that I think you want to use Sendero or consider Sendero for Huisache is if you don't have a pesticide applicator license, it doesn't require one. Or if you have a mixture of Mesquite and Sendero and Huisache, and they're both ready at the same time to spray, then you could use Sendero. You can't use Grazon P plus D on both of them because it's not effective on Mesquite. So that's where I see Sendero fitting individual plant leaf sprays. Okay, so I'm going to take a little pause here and see if there are any questions that have popped up in the chat box. And I'm not sure I see any, Pete. Oh, somebody's typing.
Yeah, a couple of folks typing a question.
Okay. Okay. Do I have any experience with Mesview? And yes, I do. And toward the end of the presentation, we're gonna talk specifically about Mesview. Okay. Okay, question was, are you using crop oil? It was in a slide. Yeah, we can use crop oils. I mean, personally, well, I tend to use surfactants, but when we're doing aerial work or even ground broadcast work, we might go to a crop oil, but we find they're both effective. Uh, what chemical should use for resprouts of Yopon after mechanical removal under big oak trees? Well, we don't have a leaf spray for Yopon, so you might want to try to. I guess you've got resprouts already, but Triclopyr ester and diesel is basically what we've got. You're gonna wait till those resprouts are kind of woody instead of just all leaf. And that's safe under oak trees, but we really don't have anything that I would suggest for under oak trees. Okay, what's the best time to spray stem spray mesquite? We can do that any time of year. It's the optimum time is during the growing season, but we can do it any time of year. Okay, is Sendero effective on elm, hackberry, and other brushy species other than mesquite? The answer is no. It's pretty specific to mesquite and Huisache for individual plant treatments, not effective for these other species that you mentioned there, elm or hackberry. Smut grass, I believe that Ally, Escort, products that have metsulfuron methyl in them are effective. Okay. Okay, which herbicide will be best to treat locusts? I'm assuming you're meaning like honey locusts. P plus D as a leaf spray is a good treatment. Elm, we don't have any leaf sprays that are good. You can do cut stumps. You might be able to do, well, if they're not too, if bark's not too rough, you might be able to do stem spray, but I think cut stump's probably going to be your best bet. Hackberry, just about anything. I mean, something that has Tordon in it, Pricklyram, would help take out hackberry. Sendero by itself would not. And other brushy species, it depends on what the mix is. As far as, I mean, if you got a mix, I would try to look at the what the biggest problem is. But for example, Triclopyr ester and Pricklyram is a fairly good approach to that, but we're not going to kill everything at the same level when you get into a mixture, because some of those species are going to be more resistant. Okay, question was, am I going to cover cedar? I wasn't going to, but I can tell you, if we're talking about blueberry cedar, my suggestion would be to cut it so it doesn't have any green on it. If you're talking about redberry cedar further west, you can do a cut stump with Tordon at 4% in water as a carrier, as a cut stump. Okay. Poison ivy. That's kind of out of my expertise. But I mean, as far as leaf spray, I think you could do the Cut-Stump. That would probably work on it. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna move ahead, and then we'll have questions at the end here. All right. So stem spray for mesquite, we're going to use 15 to 25% triclopyr ester depending on stem diameter. If it's less than 1.5 inches, we can back off to the 15%. If it's more than 1.5 inches, we got to go 25, and we go all the way up to corky bark. Once the bark gets corky, then we got to go to you got to use more volume, or we got to go to another method. You want to lightly spray all the stems all the way around from the ground to 12 inches high, and it works any time of year, and there's no soil activity with the herbicide. You might get a little bit of grass burn with the diesel carrier. Okay, Huisache pretty much the same, except I think we need to use 25% triclopyr if we're going to get a very high kill, that 76 and better kill. Same X1 nozzle, anytime, year, and lightly spray the stems. Okay, the Triclopyr ester comes in Remedy Ultra. It also comes in some generics like Clear Pasture and some others that you may see. If you go to a generic, you want to have 4 pounds of active ingredient or acid equivalent in the product, and that information is going to be on the label. Okay, so I've got a quiz question for you here. If we're going to treat this mesquite here, do we want to use stem spray or leaf spray? And so Pete's popped up a quiz here, so just click on one of those answers there, stem spray, leaf spray, or either, and then we'll talk about it after we get the responses. Okay, I think we got most of you have weighed in on it, and the majority of you said leaf spray, and that would be the correct answer. And the reason it's correct is because you have all these stems. You'd have to treat all these stems, and doing that would be really tough. And my experience with kill on a plant like this, leaf spray, is about maybe 40 to 50%. So leaf spray would be the option, and that's what I said at the beginning, is when you got these multiple stem plants, your options are, you have fewer options. Okay. All right, so another quiz question. This particular plant here, would we do stem spray or leaf spray, or either? Okay, I think most of you weighed in, and 62% of you said either, and that in fact is the correct answer. And the reason is we have a single stem plant here, and then so that would make this a plant that we could do stem spray on, and then there's no reason that we can't do leaf spray on this single stem plant. So either one of them would be okay. All right. Okay, so let's move into cut stumps. Couple of tools we can use here. We can use loppers, we can use chainsaws, we can use these brush cutters like this that have popped up over the last several years. And on the left, we've got the wrong way to cut. They left it too high. On the right here, they've cut it correctly, close to the ground and level. So when we're doing this, the cut stumps, 15% Triclopyr ester and diesel, we can back off on the percent there because we're opening up the cambium layer of the plant. Cut every stem close to the soil surface. Avoid getting soil up on that stump because that's going to act like a wick, keeping spray away from it. Just the nozzle coarse mist. You want to spray entire cut surface and especially the outer edges, and then from the bark, spray the bark from the cut to the ground level. So get it nice and wet. And we typically put some dye in, about an ounce of dye per gallon, so it'll mark the spray and we can make sure we treated it. This method really works best if you work in teams where one person's cutting and somebody's coming along behind spraying. And the question I get is about this, when to spray. So we say immediately, and I'm going to show you there's really two reasons to spray immediately. All right, so this is some work that was done out at Fort Stockton several years ago, and they cut at different time intervals, 15 minutes all the way up to 8 hours after cutting. And you can see that the first year after they treated, even out here at 4 hours, we're looking at 85% mortality, and it drops off here at 8 hours. But when we do brush evaluations, we evaluate 1 and 2 years, and so this is what happened the second year. When they looked at the same plants, at 1 hour they had lost almost 20 percentage points in efficacy. So you want to treat immediately so that it works. And the other reason you want to treat immediately is so you can find it. If you have a small stem and you cut it, if you can't find it, you shouldn't have cut it, because now you've created a multi-stem plant. It's going to sprout on you. Okay, a couple mistakes. One is they missed one of these stems here that they cut, and it sprouted back. And then over here, they actually missed part of that cut surface. And the reason it sprouted back was they missed that cut surface, and so herbicide did not move down to the buds below that point on the cut surface. And so that's why it sprouted back. All right, in some test plots, we use these quart bottles to apply the spray, and I think they're a pretty useful tool to do that rather than carrying around a backpack. Just another option for you. Okay, so getting into the prickly pear, and this is going to take us into mesoview. Right now, what we recommend for individual plant treatments is Surmount, and basically a lot of the reason is because of cost. It's a restricted use herbicide. We can also use PastureGard HL, which is a non-restricted use herbicide. And this is what PastureGard HL looks like versus Surmount and Tordon. Did just as good a job, but the problem is it costs more. But if you don't have a pesticide applicator license, the PastureGard HL is an option for you. And then around sensitive areas, it can be used because it doesn't have soil residual. You do need to be a little bit careful about it because they're both products and they're esters, so they can volatilize. So if we're using Surmount, we're going to use 1%. Again, the surfactant, the dye, in water. Spray all pads to wet. Try to spray both sides of all pads. And then with using Surmount, it works best when you got good soil moisture, and you want to make sure that you've got about 3 days of temperatures above 50, 3 consecutive days, and then you can spray. And that's information that's on the Surmount label. And that's because the pear is probably shutting down at colder temperatures. So the mesoview, this the new herbicide that's coming out this year. It should be available in gallon containers this month. It's a combination of 3 herbicides: Aminopyrrolid, which is in Sendero, part of what's in Sendero, and then Picloram and Fluroxypyr, which is basically Surmount. So it's Aminopyrrolid plus Surmount. So we've looked at rates, individual plant rates from 0.25% all the way up to 1% versus PastureGard, Surmount, and Tordon at 1%. And if we look at these averages here, we can't really separate the averages. But there's another way to look at this. And this is what we call a box and whisker graph. And really the main thing to understand here is that the smaller the box, the more consistent that those numbers were, the data were. So if we look at Mesaview at 1%, that's got the smallest box. That X there, that's the average. So we're at 12 months after treatment, we're getting about 95% or so mortality on the pads, and less variation within that in those treatments. If you look over here at PastureGard, Surmount, and Tordon, there's a lot more variation here. Those boxes are bigger, and that means that we've got control levels that go all the way down to 35%, all the way up to 100%. Whereas with the Mesaview at 1%, we're looking at 80% to 100%. So consistency is what we're seeing with the Mesaview at 1%. Okay, so ground broadcast, we did a similar study with rates of 8 ounces all the way up to 32 ounces. And again, statistically, we can't separate these averages here. But if we look at that box and whisker graph again, we see that the least amount of variation is with the 32 ounces of Mesaview. So our suggestions are going to be 1% Mesaview for individual plant treatment, 32 ounces for broadcast applications. You want to put the surfactant and the dye in again as you would with the other. This just shows 7 months. You can see over here, this is Mesaview after 7 months. This is Tordon after 7 months. So it knocks it down pretty quick. Okay, questions. If we go back to the box and see if there are any questions. Okay. Why do you have to cut the ground level versus say 6 inches? Well, 6-inch stump is gonna be a hazard for one thing. And you're gonna have to use more spray if you have more stem there. So if you cut close to ground level, you're gonna get that stump out of the way. And like I said, you're gonna have to use more spray because you have to spray from the cut surface down to the ground level. Well, yeah, you said you can see all the stumps, but then later on you're going to be driving over those stumps or falling over them. So okay. How do you treat persimmons? We've got basically we can do stem spray after mature leaves and before June 15th. We can do Cut-Stump on persimmon any time, and I'm assuming you're talking about Texas persimmon. And then we also, if it's a wildlife area or if it's a fence line, you can use a combination of a herbicide called Method 240 SL plus Remedy Ultra or Triclopyr ester as a leaf spray on persimmon, and that's in our 1466 publication that we'll send to you if we have your email. Okay.
Okay, we'll wait for more questions. While waiting for more questions, y'all feel free to type them in the chat bot. Thank you for attending today. The survey is going to pop in your browser. Please take time to complete the survey. The responses are anonymous. And again, there's another question, so I'll let Doc cover the question before I finish the last slide here.
Okay, I think Mesaview is going to reach eventually everybody. I mean, that's the reason they're putting it in gallon containers. It's because they want to get it out there. Okay, those big mesquites, uh, if you can't do it from the air, you're going to have to maybe think about some mechanical method like root plowing, because 15 foot tall, that's too big to really do from the ground. Right, individual plant treatment, you just can't get good coverage on those plants. Load bush, you can do stem spray. We've got some soil applied herbicides in that 1466. There's suggestions for it. Okay.
I guess what I'll say at this point is, again, if you took this class for CU credit, type in your email address on ChatPod. If you're interested on the 1466 publication, go ahead and type in your email address. Once again, kind of a reminder, some of these sometimes check your spam box. Many times this information goes to the spam box.
Okay, how would you treat flame leaf sumac? You can do it with Grazon P plus D as a leaf spray. You can do Cut-Stump stem spray.
Okay, Alan, with this, you put in your email address and matching your records that you paid, you'd be good to go. Again, our next session is going to be April 4th, 2019, Saving Family Land, Challenges, Opportunities of Working Lands in Texas. Mr. Clint Cleary is going to be our speaker. And if you're not doing so, please, you can follow us on Facebook, on facebook.com, and you can look for us under TX range. We'd be glad for you to follow us there. I'm going to go ahead and pop out the survey now. If the survey covers up your screen, if you look down your screen, you see a little green icon that appears to be like a almost like a four-leaf clover. You click on it, you get back to this page. Doc, thank you for being here today. Really great information.
You're welcome.
And I guess I'm gonna go ahead and hold off a little bit for any more questions. If the survey didn't pop up on your screen, you can actually click on this link. It should take you to it.